Hi, I'm John Fishbein. I'm a Senior Program Manager at the GFOA. I'm here with Tim Blake. He is Managing Director of Finance at Moody's. Thank you, Tim, for joining us. And why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you do for Moody's?
Sure. Hi, John. Good afternoon. So I am a manager in Moody's Public Finance Department, and I oversee the state government ratings and a couple of other analytical teams in the department. We at Moody's are all working from our homes since mid-March, and we're using Zoom like most everyone else, as well as conference calls, webinars, etc., with the issuer community and the investor community. We are right now evaluating when and how we'll be able to return to our several offices across the country, which are in Dallas, Chicago, San Francisco, Boston, and New York. I'm talking to you from my home in New York. Over the last 3 months, we've been very engaged and productive with significant rating management activity, significant research publication activity, and one measure of this, which you may know, is that issuance volume in the municipal market year to date is up pretty significantly compared to 2019, despite.
Is that because just the interest rates are lower, or because governments need the money more?
Yeah, well, year to date, it's mostly the increase is high refinance activity. You're right about that. But we are seeing some governments also issuing for liquidity purposes pretty significantly starting now. So we're very busy doing it all from home.
Okay, I wanted to get in some detail. You're basically, if I understand your responsibilities, you analyze the individual states, the 50 states, financial condition, and New York and Washington, D.C., right?
That is right. The main team that I oversee is state ratings, and we do include New York City and D.C. in that group.
Right, let me ask you, let's get into a little bit of detail. First of all, just going to sound, I'm going to be contrarian, and we'll get this right off the bat. Are there any states that have had an upgrade since COVID-19?
No, there are not any states that have. I mean, all the states rely on economically sensitive income and sales taxes, and they have all seen a very sharp drop in those taxes in the last few months, and they expect it's going to take some time to recover.
Now, I knew that would be an easy question. Now, let me ask you, going to the next step, how many have gotten downgraded?
Actually, we have not downgraded any states this year at Moody's. And the reason is that, while it is a sort of a crisis period right now, for our ratings managers, we try to look through the crisis to where are they going to come out, say a year, 2 years from now. And state governments have a lot of strengths. They have very broad fiscal powers. And we believe that, most of the states are going to navigate this period successfully. That said, we have applied a negative rating outlook to 5 states. And those are ones that we feel have an above average job ahead of them. I mean, everyone has a tough job. But if you think of a couple of states that are very tourism dependent in their economies, Hawaii, Nevada, or states that have sort of vulnerable finances because of low reserves or high pensions, so think Illinois and New Jersey. Those are the types of states we have put a negative outlook on, but we have not changed any ratings.
Now, Illinois and New Jersey were lower rated coming into this. So at what point, how low can you get in terms of the ratings and in terms of kind of your fear on what's going to happen there?
Yeah, well, you're right. Illinois and New Jersey are the 2 lowest rated states at Baa3 and A3, respectively. And the situation there is, since the Great Recession, they have been outliers. Almost all the other states have basically taken the opportunity of the steady economic growth and used their strong financial management to get themselves in a strong position. But Illinois and New Jersey have really not been able to strengthen. In fact, they've weakened during the expansion, and so that puts them at more exposure right now. But they're state governments. They have very broad powers to adjust their budgets. They have very broad, deep tax bases, and so they are still, investment-grade credits for sure.
How much of that, at least from those states and the others that perhaps have lower ratings, is due to pensions, or is that kind of the simplistic comparison or correlation?
Yeah. No, good question. I mean, pensions are probably costing all governments more than they ever expected they were going to cost. But the majority of states, most states, it is still a very affordable part of the budget. There are really just a handful of states that have significant pension burden. So Illinois, New Jersey, a couple of others.
Looking at the states that are higher rated, is that because they have lower pension obligations or they have more diverse revenues? Perhaps you could talk about some of those states that have a higher ratings.
Sure. Well, that's a lot of states because our average rating for state government GO bonds is AA1. And it's been AA1 for a long time, and it's probably going to stay at AA1. We don't expect a lot of rating movement other than, states that sort of deviate from the norm. And that's because of the inherent strengths of state governments. By and large, they are very diverse economies, very deep tax bases, low debt, strong powers to adjust their budgets, including the ability to shift some costs and pressures down to what we call downstream entities, local governments, school districts, public colleges. So the weakest point in the state credit picture probably is pensions, because the pension obligations, unfunded pension obligations for most states are larger than their bonded debt outstanding. And they're still growing. Even with an expanding economy, the pension obligations have still been growing. So that's a challenge. But as I said before, it's an affordable challenge.
It's interesting to hear you talk, because coming into our conversation, if I were to ask, or somebody were to ask me how many states would be potentially downgraded because of COVID-19, I would have said way more than 5. So I kind of think that's kind of a good sign, isn't it?
Well, it is. As I said, there are very strong inherent credit qualities that make states a good credit. And also, we're early in the COVID downturn, right? There are forecasts of gloom and doom, but there's also a lot of movement in forecasts right now. We've seen 2 states recently revise their revenues upward, their revenue projections upward, because the plunge wasn't as deep as they were fearing. So I think the key is how long does this revenue weakness persist? And, we do think it's going to persist at least into fiscal 22. But if things start, if revenues start coming back well in fiscal 22, then, I don't think we'll see much.
I was thinking that it's perhaps not just the pension obligations, but those states, perhaps Illinois, New York, California, Washington, that perhaps got hit more through COVID-19, that they're more susceptible to, weaker financial conditions. Have you found that to be true?
I don't think it's the number of coronavirus ICU cases that's driving a state effect here. It's more the nature of the economy and how the sort of changes in the way consumers will react that is affecting things. So, for example, Hawaii, very few actual COVID cases, but they are such a tourism-dependent economy. They need people to fly to Hawaii, and that activity is going to be down. They think, and we think, for several years.
How are
so
states
that's why
balancing their budget? Are they going into reserves? Are they cutting expenditures?
Yeah, well, the good news prior to the COVID situation was that most states, other than the two we talked about, really were in very good position. They had balanced budgets, structurally balanced budgets, and large amounts in their rainy day funds, record total amount in rainy day funds and other reserves. So what we will see states doing to react to this weaker revenue environment, we will see draws on reserves for sure, but more significant than that will be spending adjustments. I think we'll see one-time spending adjustments such as deferring capital spending, that type of thing. We'll also see recurring cuts to things like higher ed funding, K-12 funding. And just how much of this we will see is also dependent on another wild card, and that's whether the federal government is going to be providing more.
Do you have a base case on that, or some type of probability, projection on that?
Yeah, our base case is what's been done so far. We're not projecting additional significant federal stimulus. That's not to say we're predicting it won't happen, but our current ratings and outlooks reflect states' ability to manage with what they've been provided with so far. And what they've been provided with so far is a lot of economic stimulus, which is good for their tax revenues, and a modest to moderate amount of direct aid, which so far is less than the direct aid the states got during the Great Recession. But that doesn't mean we can count on them getting more. So,
and what about the upcoming election?
Basically,
do you see that affecting states' financial condition one way or another if Biden wins versus Trump? That's why I'm here.
That's a good question. Yeah, no, exactly. Well, the federal resources can be very influential, right? If there were to be more direct aid in any new administration for any reason, that would be a significant plus. I think what it would do is it would reduce the amount that states have to cut to lower levels of government, and it would also and that in turn would be good for the economy and good for those lower levels of government.
I guess
states are going to be able to balance their budgets one way or the other.
It may be, shifting as well. So that's something to look out for. Okay, I have one other question for you. And I found this interesting that you did both New York City and Washington, D.C. Can you briefly, and I know this is kind of simplistic, but the similarities and differences in their financial condition?
Sure. Okay. Well, they're both very strong credits. New York City's AA1, Washington, D.C.'s AAA. Both of these cities have very strong economies, excellent budget management, including a strong multi-year fiscal planning process. New York's lower rating reflects the fact that it has a higher burden of long-term debt and retirement liabilities, significantly higher than D.C. Do you remember that these two cities were the finalists of the Amazon HQ2 contest in 2018? These were the winners, and that is a testament to their knowledge-based economies and highly educated workforces. Remember, one of Amazon's criteria was a strong mass transit system. Today, it may look like that dependence on density and mass transit is kind of a weakness in the coronavirus era, but it's far too early to make that a long-term conclusion about New York City and D.C. So in the short term, we've changed New York City's rating outlook to negative because they're projecting a very sizable tax revenue hit, and they have very significant disruption to the tourism and business travel sector that's so important to New York City's economy.
That will wrap up our conversation with Tim Blake.
I'm
John Fishbein, and I want to thank you for joining us. And Tim, I want to thank you. You've been very considerate with your time.